Welcome to the Museum of Kashmir podcast with your host Muhammad Faisal. In our new series Sultanat, we take a deep dive into the medieval era of Kashmir. In our first episode, we explore the reign of the illustrious King Zain Abidin from the 15th century. We are joined by Samir Hamdani, who is a distinguished Kashmiri historian and design director at INTACH J&K. His expertise lies in Islamic religious architecture in South Asia. He has authored the insightful books, The Syncretic Traditions of Islamic Religious Architecture of Kashmir, early 14th and 18th century, and Shi'ism in Kashmir, a history of Sunni Shia rivalry and reconciliation. With him is Shakir Mir. He is a seasoned journalist hailing from Srinagar with a keen focus on politics, conflict and history. His work has been featured in various Indian and international publications, providing critical insights into the socio-political dynamics of the region. We start with the early life of King Zain al-Abidin.
Generally, if you see the histories that we have got, in terms of the tarikhs that we have got, they are rather very minuscule in terms of the details, about personal details that we get for mostly any king as such. So sometimes the king gets a para or more or a para less. But as far as Zain al-Abidin is concerned, we have works written by contemporary historians which have survived. So they give a greater understanding of both the man, his development, and also the period that he's a part of. So if you see, the point of reference for Zain al-Abidin would be Gulchus invasion, which happens way back in 1320s. But then it's a country which is depopulated. So slowly we see, as we move towards the reign of Sultan Shahabuddin, that from a land which has lost almost all of its vigor and which has lost most of its human resource, is slowly starting to get back on its feet. And that is the part which carries well into the reign of Zain al-Abidin. So there is this famous story that during his father's reign, we had the famous, the arrival of Timur Lang, or Timur Lane as you call him, in South Asia. And then Sultan Sikandar, Zain al-Abidin's father, sent Zain al-Abidin as a kid, as a child, as an emissary to Samarkand, and then Timur just kept him there as a hostage. But given the fact that there are dates which somehow do not seem to match with what is written, so one of the mentions that you have of this event is in Dead Mary's Waqat Kashmir. But then most historians have sort of now come to the point wherein they are questioning whether Zain al-Abidin was even of that age he could be sent as an emissary or even as the political ambassador to the court of Timur. So that is, I think, historically incorrect. But generally, in Kashmir, Zain al-Abidin's period as a kid growing up would be a period wherein you are seeing people arriving from the region which is Persianate, arriving from the region which is Timurid. So it starts way before Zain al-Abidin's period, when we have Mir Sayyid Ali Hamdani, or as we famously call him in Kashmir, Shah Hamdan, arriving here. But more importantly, during the reign of Sultan Sikandar, we have Mir Muhammad Hamdani coming to Kashmir, Shah Hamdan's son. And for 12 years or so, he resides in Kashmir. So this is a rather very powerful figure, a powerful Kubrawi Sheikh who resides in this Kashmir, who moves in and around Kashmir at the period when Zain al-Abidin would be sort of growing up. Again, it's not only Mir Muhammad Hamdani, we have other people who are arriving in Kashmir. We have Sayyid Muhammad Madni, we have Sayyid Hussain Qumi, and other people who are coming into Kashmir. And you are seeing a gradual transformation of at least the court in Srinagar, which is getting imbibed with the very greater degree of Persianate influences. It's becoming a bit more orthodox or conservative as far as Sultan Sikandar's immediate reign is concerned. So I think for around 26 years, Sikandar is there as the ruler. And in a way, Kashmir sort of slowly moves away from the boundaries of a Sanskrit world into a Persianate world. And it is at that exact point wherein there is this transition from one cultural legacy into another that we have the formation of, as he was known at that time, Shahi Khan, the second son of Sultan Sikandar, who, while he was growing, we don't know even he had an idea that he would one day be the reigning king, because the tendency was within the Shamiris that the throne would pass on to the elder brother, the younger brother, from the elder brother to the younger brother, and then into the siblings, again in terms of the siblings to the eldest son. So you don't have this notion at that early period, that's Zainul Abidin or Shahi Khan would succeed his father. But then, given the events that happened, so we have this brave reign of Sultan Ali Shah, Sikandar's elder son, Zainul Abidin's elder brother, who comes in, occupies the throne for around 8 years, and then is dethroned by Zainul Abidin. And then we have this great king whom we call Budshah.
So, Shakir, coming to you, because we were discussing about what role Zainul Abidin might have played in Taimur's court. Do you have any information with regards to that?
I think I would just agree with Samir's assertion that we have a very scanty evidence when it comes to whether Zainul Abidin even went to the Timurid court or not. In fact, with the recent book, Abdul Qayyum al-Rafiqi's translation of Sayyid Taqi Sayyid Ali, he gives a 100-page long introduction. And among the many things that he disagrees with the Sayyid Ali's text is this thing, that Taimur was held as a hostage in the Timurid court. He says that there is no other contemporary source which corroborates this claim. So we'll have to be a bit skeptical about how much of this is true. But when we talk about Budshah, the Shahi Khan, as he was called in his initial days, other texts like Baharistan Shahi record him that he came from, they do recall that he came from Samarkand. And right after Samarkand, they realized that he told his brother that he should abdicate, which he did. He went to Makkah. He wanted to do go for a pilgrimage. He went to Makkah, but before his brother Miran Shah, who other texts call as Ali Shah, he went to his father-in-law, who was a Hindu Raja of Jammu. He went to seek his blessings, but his father-in-law is alleged to have told him, he is said to have admonished him that he can cover. He called it a cowardice of him to abdicate the throne to his brother. And then what that happens that the Raja of Jammu gives him his own forces, paramilitary troops, and tells him to get into a fight with his brother and then retake the throne. In that, but Budshah, on the other hand, collected his own army from Punjab, from what is today Pakistan, and both the brothers came into a confrontation. But Budshah had another interesting component, another group of people who had supported him in that confrontation. They were the Baihaqi Sarai. Just like Samir said, there were a lot of influx of the people from the what is called the Persianate world. One of those peoples were the Baihaqi Sarais, who were the one of the aristocratic families in the Sabzawar region of Iran. They were also expelled as part of the Timurid invasions into the former Ilkhanate. So when Baharistan Shahi gives a very detailed account of how the first Baihaqi, Sayyid Mahmud Baihaqi, had fought with the Taimur, and then he lost, and then he went to the shrines of Qom and Mashhad, and then eventually came to Delhi and to Kashmir. Then what we find that this appears to be a very crucial strategy of these foreign immigrants, as while they tried to embed themselves into the royal court. They gave Budshah the support, and Budshah won, and Ali Shah had to leave, and then Budshah became the king. So this is where we see the foreigners also playing a role in helping Budshah become the king. Then he rechristened himself as the Zainul Abidin Budshah. Before that, he was named the Shahi Khan.
Is there like any background, like why he chose the title Zainul Abidin? Because
I'm not sure. Maybe Samir might help to throw some light on this aspect.
Yes,
I mean, this is a norm wherein in the family, if you see the names that are running, barring Sikandar, which is almost more of a mythic, legendary name in terms of its association with Alexander, you have Qutbuddin, you have Shahabuddin, you have Alauddin. In fact, the first Shahmiri king himself takes the title of Shamsuddin. Shahmir himself, the founder of the dynasty, takes the title of Shamsuddin. So I think it's more or less a tradition within the family. And it's also part of the way Muslim monarchies or Muslim rulership operated in this period. So if you see, we remember Jahangir as Jahangir, but his full name is Nuruddin Muhammad Jahangir. So Zahiruddin Muhammad Babur. So I mean, these are a part of the sort of, how would I put it, the way they are taking upon the prestige of being the rulership or being rulers. So that is somewhere there. Why this specific one, Zainul Abidin, I mean, you can't comment because no one has written about it, so it will be just a guess. But generally, in the end, of all the Kashmiri sultans or the kings, I think the name Zainul Abidin didn't suit him, because what does it mean? The what do you call the ladder of the Abids, or the pious in a way. And his life, at least as we come towards the concluding part of his life, it's a bit tragic, but it's one which is very spiritual also. So, I mean, in a way, it does sort of match with the personality of the person as it is.
I think he recalibrated with his name by the end of his time.
Yeah.
So let's talk about his time, like when he returns from Samarkand and comes all the way to Srinagar, and in 1420 to 1470 he rules Kashmir, and I mean, if we talk about resume of kings in Kashmir, I'm pretty sure, like, when it comes to accomplishments, his is the biggest one. So let's run through some of the biggest achievements he had, Samir Saab.
I mean, generally, I mean, if you have a look at the history of people who ruled Kashmir, both the kings and queens, and we had famous queens also in Kashmir, would Zainul Abidin be the greatest of them all? Now, that's a question, and that's something, in the end, it turns to be a bit personal take on the period. But, I mean, the nearest competitor would be Lalitaditya. With Lalitaditya, you have the fact that he is a big conqueror. I mean, the way Kashmiri historians present him, I mean, he has conquered all the way from Afghanistan and even further down till almost Sri Lanka. Maybe that's more of a legend rather than fact. But you have this first Kashmiri king who actually expands the boundaries of Kashmir, the geography of Kashmir, beyond the empire, beyond the immediate boundary of Kashmir into a vaster land. And again, even though that is, I mean, pivotal in the sense that his period did see a certain artistic revival. It is the classical period of medieval Kashmiri art and architecture. There is a promotion of literature. So now the question is, here you have one king, which is Lalitaditya, and then you have Zainul Abidin, almost from, I mean, 9th to 14th century, you move to 15th century. Who would be the greatest? And I would still argue for Zainul Abidin, primarily because of the fact that though his conquest, he was not a military conqueror, though we have accounts that they regained territories that had gone out of Kashmir's control. Sort of met the incursions of the Kashgaris in Tibet, and etc. But primarily, what is the importance of Zainul Abidin? I mean, he is a person who, both in terms of his personality and as well as in terms of the people and the arts and crafts he's promoting, is sort of connecting two different worlds, which I said, the Persianate worlds and the Sanskrit world. There is an equal amount of patronage for the both. But that is not the only point. He is one who is actually giving to Kashmir virtually almost everything that it is famous for today. I mean, what does Kashmir stand out for? It's crafts. And where do these crafts get generated? Though historically we have this narrative that we say that some, if not all of the craftsmen came with Mir Sayyid Ali Hamdani Shah Hamdan. But those are textual, I would say, statements without much of material evidence. If you come to actual material evidence, you see it is from Zainul Abidin's period. And you have to remember that his is a very long reign. It's almost a half a century reign. He rules for 52 years. So from this large period, which is also a very stable period, and he has the resources, Kashmir and his court in Kashmir acts as a center of patronage for different people, mostly from the Persianate world, who come to Kashmir and bring with them different arts and crafts. And this is what gives Kashmir longevity in terms of its overall appeal. We are known for our crafts still. We are not known for the fact that during a certain period of history, we conquered Gujarat, or we conquered Balakh, or we conquered Samarkand. People have come, empires have come and crumbled down. But it is primarily for these enduring gifts that we got because of this king that Kashmir is renowned even today. I mean, we have just two things. One is the geography, the beauty of Kashmir, which we have always sort of eulogized as a paradise. Secondly is the hunar, the fun which is in Kashmir. And where do you trace it? Primarily, it starts coming from Zainul Abidin's period. So that is his greatness, what he gave to his people for posterity, continuing even way down today. So that's one way of looking at it. But then again, it is also a period of great knowledge formation and dissemination. And just remember that the nearest parallel, at least in South Asia, you have is in Akbar, who happens almost a century down after Zainul Abidin. So here is this ruler who's getting Sanskrit word translated into Persian. But that is not the only thing. We have the famous Persian Sufi mystic Buzarg Maulana Abdul Rahim Jami. And Jami is still known throughout the Kashmir because of his naats. His naats are read in each and every Mawlud across Kashmir. But Jami also wrote his Yusuf Zulekha, right? And within, I think, a period of 10 or 12 years, that work gets translated into Persian. It doesn't happen in Zainul Abidin's court, it happens in the court of his successors, but the impetus to that comes from Zainul Abidin himself. So he is a person who is a great promoter of knowledge. He's a person who's a great collector. I mean, he has this fascination for collecting rarities. And what does he value? Not elephants. He gets a good amount of gifts of those, not sort of precious stones, but knowledge. In the sense, he's always sending people across to get a rare manuscript, get them back to Kashmir. And you have this huge library, which unfortunately was lost during the reign of Sultan Fateh. But overall, you find that here is this one person who imbibes in himself the cosmopolitan character, which comes to many lands later. And this is all happening in, let's say, in 1420 to 1473 or 1472, which is 15th century, the mid part of the 15th century.
Shakir, and a lot of people, I mean, from a Kashmiri's perspective, a lot of us know this about that he brought these crafts that are still an enduring legacy, as Samir said. But there's something that you have been working on, like when it comes to Zainul Abidin's connection with the greater Muslim world or greater Islamic world. What was the kind of foreign policy that he had at that time, or the influence that he had over the larger Persianate world?
A lot, actually. In fact, he had a lot of diplomatic ties with the empires around the world. Some Middle Eastern or Central Asian kings would send him gifts, presents like Bactrian camels. Others would send Arabian horses. Egyptian kings would send him presents of their own. And there is one interesting dimension that I have observed, because what Samir Saab also said, that he would get his best of calligraphers and tell them to collect the best of texts that we have around the world. In one instance, which is mentioned in one of the Persian texts, is a copy of Kashaf. It is a Mutazilite commentary on Quran. Now we know that in early Abbasid period, the Muslim world was divided ideologically in these two categories called Ash'ari and Mutazilite. While as Ash'ari were more literalist, Mutazilites had pioneered a very speculative tradition called Kalam, the speculative thought, where they would have a pretty much liberal interpretation of Islam. And it is in this period that much of what we call as golden age of Islam had flourished, in the Abbasid period as well. So we see that Budshah is showing inclination towards that kind of that particular interpretation of Islam. He sends his best calligraphers. He pays for their travel. He takes care of their families. He pays all the stipends, and he manages to fund their travel and their stay in Mecca. And there he gets the Kashaf exact copy. He gets it copied there, and then those calligraphers come back to Kashmir. So it's a very huge commentary, and it's a great showpiece in the court of Budshah. It's one of the many texts that Budshah got translated, along with other Sanskrit texts like Ratnakar Purana or Raj Tarangini, and other Kalhana's Raj Tarangini, or Vishnu Dharmottara Purana, or other the Shastras that he would also listen. Just like Samir said, that it was a very peculiar and a very complex fusion of two cultures. He brought the two cultures together in a manner in which we had never seen before. So this shows that he had this sort of a very his connection to Muslim world was very unprecedented, because we have references to Shihabuddin crossing over to other areas of the Muslim world, and thus as such the Sufi the Sufi mystics who were there, like Mir Sayyid Ali Hamdani. Samir Hamdani in his first book actually alludes to this. He says that it is Shihabuddin's conquest that might have led to the knowledge of Kashmir as a new sultanate being spread, disseminated across the Muslim world. But while as that was the beginning, we see it reached its pinnacle in the Budshah's period, because we see a lot of people coming, and then great kings and princes elsewhere establishing diplomatic ties with Budshah. In fact, in Tariq-e-Hasan, Pir Hassan Shah even mentions that the person who is buried at the Rosabal shrine in Kanyar is actually Egyptian envoy to Budshah. He wasn't. There are a lot of mythology around that figure, around that person who is buried there. But Hassan in his book writes that he's the Egyptian envoy to Budshah. So clearly, we have evidence that Kashmir at that time existed as a very big kingdom in its own right, which had a very bona fide relations with the foreign empires at that time, particularly of the Muslim world.
I think we also worked on. I mean, you also told me about his connection to the Ottoman Empire. Like, he did send people to today's Turkey as well.
Yes, exactly. He sent them to place called not just Sultanat of Ram. Some Persian texts call it Sultanat of Ram, which should correspond to the Turkey or modern day Turkey, and also the Transoxiana, which in the Persian sources are called Mawara al-Nahar, which is the land beyond the Oxus River. So he sends people there, and he gets the books translated. He has relationship with the kings of those countries, and a lot of we see this steady building up of relations between those empires that are in the Middle East, in the West Asia, in the Central Asia, and Kashmir in a manner in which wasn't there previously before. And also, I would like to call the attention towards what Samir Saab initially told us, that he was he's compared to Lalit Aditya. There's an interesting anecdote about Lalit Aditya that we get from Raj Tarankani, is that when he was building his new empire, he was like transitioning from the Shavite Kashmir, which was distinctly based on the beliefs of Shaivism, to Vaishnavism. So to sort of celebrate, to commemorate that thing, Lalit Aditya built a new temple, new city at Parihaspura, which at that time was the confluence of two rivers, Sindh and Jhelum. So he wanted to show that this is a new empire, and this is how I'm expanding it, and Parihaspura will be the new confluence, which will be known as Prayag. It was supposed to mirror the Prayag that there is in India. So he was essentially also doing two things. He was expanding the new kingdom. He was consolidating his own kingdom, while also asserting the very sui generis Hinduism of Kashmir. So to sort of assert a very peculiar identity that is rooted in the land. Even when he talks about the Hindu, the Vaishnavite belief that he was rooted, that his identity was rooted in. Exactly at the same spot, exactly at the confluence of this Jhelum and Sindh, we see Budshah creating a third canal, a flood channel, because Budshah did a lot of this irrigation work. He created a lot of flood channels. He in his rule, we see a lot of development happening. A lot of marshes were converted into the rice fields. In fact, Shrivara in his Raj Tarangini says that there is hardly any person in Kashmir who hasn't eaten the king's rice. And Moorcroft, but in his book, says that the rice production during the Budshah's period was like 10 times more than there was during the Sikh period in Kashmir. So he does that exactly at the same spot, this confluence of Sindh and Jhelum. So there must be some acknowledgements. Budshah perhaps had it in mind that there is a great king like Lalit Aditya, and probably, maybe, it's just a speculation, maybe that he was also in some ways trying to emulate him.
So one of the biggest legacies of Zainul Abidin or Budshah is of him being this tolerant ruler. I mean, this comes as a result of the circumstances where he became the king. And previously there was his father, who was infamous for being an icon of caste, or allegedly destroying temples, or allegedly forcing Hindu minority or majority. I mean, it depends what kind of a ratio was at that time. like a lot of Hindu Kashmiri Pandits left Kashmir, and then Budshah brought them back to the valley, to their homeland. So, let us talk about his role as a tolerant ruler, and how uh, it's also this part of our DNA as a Kashmiri people. The sense of tolerance. So, yath kashir paitis are vananch, towards others, because he's also revered as a great king by the Kashmiri Pandit community as well.
I mean, generally we still remember Budshah today as Zainul Abidin as Budshah, right? It is the name that he's remembered. And if you see one of the earlier, not earlier, but at least one of the Persian texts that we have, Baharistani Shahi, it mentions that it is the Hindus who call Zainul Abidin Budshah. So there is this sort of a distance. It's not a term that is coming from the Muslim community. It is the Hindus who are referring to Zainul Abidin as Budshah. In some other texts, it doesn't seem to be that obvious, but at least in this text, you have this notion that the title of Budshah comes from the Kashmiri Pandits. But then again, if you see the histories which are Persian and written by Muslim, and the histories which are in Hindi, there is a slight difference of opinion when they come to judge Zainul Abidin. And the reason is because one of how he sort of engages himself. Secondly is the figure of his father, Sultan Sikandar. Now, if you see all Muslim historians writing in Persian, Baristani Shahi, Tariq Malik Haidar Chadura, then we come towards Abka Rivalry, and the others who come in between, they celebrate Budshah as a king who gave a very humane administration, a person who was given to the sort of cultivation of knowledge, of art and craft. But then there is a minor sort of a critique also of Zainul Abidin, wherein they say he was not that inclined towards the promotion of Sharia as his father. So, I mean, he stands in the light of his father, who is, as you rightly said, seen as an iconic class and is also celebrated as such by the medieval Persian historians. And when it comes to the Muslim historians, they also celebrate Zainul Abidin. They have nothing wrong to say about him. And they also speak about the fact that during his period, all faiths, people of all faiths prospered. There was nothing in the Sultan's personality in which someone was discriminated. But then once it comes to the sort of that concluding sort of assessment of the king, while they are always happy about the fact that he gave to Kashmir these many things, he was liberal, there is the slight critique, sort of a hint of a critique, of criticism, that he was not given that much toward the advancement of Islam as his father or forefathers. The reverse happens with the Sanskrit texts, wherein he is actually seen as an incarnation of Vishnu. And you have one of the beautiful poems written by Srivara, wherein he speaks about who needs Krishna when he has, or who needs Vishnu when he has a benevolent patron as benevolent as Zainul Abidin. So there is that sort of, I won't say the extremes, but there is this sort of a nuanced appreciation of what the policy, that policy of tolerance or liberalism or cosmopolitanism that was associated with the Sultan, how it was seen in immediate times and in later generations. The question is, what was the king trying to do? I mean, it is not that Zainul Abidin did not promote the Sharia. We have the personality of Maulana Kabir, who is still known in Kashmir as Mal Kabir, who was tutor to Zainul Abidin. Then he went to Herat, he studied there, he taught there, and Zainul Abidin actually had him repeatedly requested Mullah Kabir to come back to Kashmir. And once he came, he was given the title of Sheikhul Islam. Now, there are some historians who say that the post of Sheikhul Islam was introduced by Sultan Sikandar, but then there are those who say that it was actually Zainul Abidin who introduced the post of Sheikhul Islam with basically Mullah Kabir. So the question is that if you see the amount of Sufis who came to his court and the patronage that he gave to them, all of them, so you would see that his was a court which was open to all. but it was most probably his personal frame of mind, a bent of mind, which in a way helped him in managing a court of diverse talents and diverse cultural upbringings, moorings, and outlooks. And in the end, he celebrated all of them, which is, as you rightly said, a point about where Kashmir's tolerance comes. As in, you have a right and you do celebrate your own faith and the sort of the material outpourings of that faith, but then you are also tolerant of others who are there. So there is the spirit of coexistence out there. So in a way, you could say Zainul Abidin's court is a very urbane, cosmopolitan court. And it is that coming of together of different cultural moorings out there, which helps I would say it helps in making that cosmopolitan character a part of the Kashmiri identity as we move forward. There are periods wherein there is a shift towards violence in Kashmir also, but generally this is a spirit that continues well into future.
Shakir, you were mentioning about Sriwara and how he looked at Zainul Abidin. Do you have any more anecdotal notes where we can see Zainul Abidin's tolerance or his image as a tolerant ruler?
So in some sense, Sriwara's Raj Tarangani is itself an expression, because it expression towards how Hindus, non-Muslims of Kashmir held Zainul Abidin in high esteem. The Raj Tarangani itself is called Zaina Raj Tarangani. It means it's even named after the Zainul Abidin. And of the more than 2,000 verses that Sriwara writes, 800, meaning close to half of them, are actually in praise of Zainul Abidin. In fact, Sriwara, even while describing a boat procession of Zain, he says that it's as though Indra's chariots are on the Milky Way. So this is the language that he uses to describe Zainul Abidin's procession through the Jahannam at one point of time. And Sriwara has a close relation to Budshah, because he says that he treats me as though I am his son. So he's in the court. He's in his court all the time. He's interacting with the Muslim immigrants from the Persian world. There are Muslim singers like Mullah Udi. He talks about the music instruments that were inlaid with the gold, the liquid gold that was there. He talks about how there are fireworks is going on, and the Budshah is watching them, and behind them the musicians from Khorasan, from other parts of the Muslim world, and as well as from the India, are coming together, and they are celebrating, and they are singing, and they are dancing. There are minstrels and every other thing. And most importantly, Sriwara also talks about how his father's land, which must have been confiscated by land mafia or something, how Budshah helped him get back his land. And we also, in the same book, we also get an anecdote about one character called Shivin Bhatta, who is probably a Kashmiri Pandit, who is one of those few families that appear to have remained after their banishment allegedly at the hands of Sultan Sikandar. So that Shivin Bhatta cures Budshah of his boil, of one of the diseases that Budshah appears to have got. And then when Budshah recovers, he respects Sriwara so much. He respects this Shivin Bhatta so much that he elevates him to the very senior administrative position, along with other Kashmiri Pandits. They are there. And from the description of Sriwara's Raj Tarangani, we can make out that they had very important role to play. They erected the temples, they rebuilt the temples. The Martanda Sun Temple the text says that it was also repaired and restored. There were other temples, almhouses for the Brahmins, visiting Brahmins that were coming from other parts of India. They were established. The mathas and these other things, all these monks were established. So clearly see this spirit of Catholicity during the time of Zainul Abidin Budshah.
There's also this locality he built in Rivalry called Jogi Lankar, which was this outhouse.
Yeah, that's what I said when I said almhouses. Those were the ones where the yogis were coming from all over India and staying.
Okay, like from tolerance, I think one of the biggest legacies that we see of Budshah even today is the architectural legacy, and Samir is the ultimate expert of that. So when we see Zainul Abidin taking over the throne, there's a few mosques or shrines that have been built by previous kings or temples, even that. But would it be fair to say that he rebuilt Srinagar in his own image, or he built the capital in his own image, like a modern medieval city?
I mean, if you just go through the textual records, you find names like Zanakut, Zanapur, Zanadab, Zanagir, Zanakadal, Zanalag, Zanabazar. Now, these are spread across the geography of Kashmir. They're not limited to Srinagar city itself, but I mean, they show the mark of the man today. I mean, okay, you have again areas like Qutbuddinpura or Shahabudinpura, Shyampura, what do you call it, which again speak about other kings, but the amount of places that are still associated with Zainul Abidin themselves speak about his sort of contribution to both Kashmir as such and in particular Srinagar. So, in case of Srinagar, he removes his capital from an area which would have been in and around Shahabdin Pool to Sikandarpura, which is now Hatta, to an area which is known as now Shihar. It's an area which is almost north of the old city that we see today, in the area which is starts from Madin Sahab, Bagh Ali, Mardan Khan, and goes all the way up to Ottoman. So this is an area which he sets up as his capital, Naushehar. That's why it's named as the new city, Naushehar. And his palace, the famous Rajdhan, is located here. And you have a wonderful description of this 12-storied palace with 50 rooms in each floor, etc., etc. And it is in existence even by the time Mirza Hyder Dughlaq comes in Kashmir. And though he's unimpressed by the interiors of the palace itself, he does speak about the site. So that is something that is happening there. But then what is Srinagar all about? These are narrow alleys and gullies and kochas, which are built in the fabric in a way in which they are associated with different crafts. So we have an area which will be Kakasgaran, where the paper makers live, and it is in Naushehra. So it was famous as such. So you have Jildgari Mohalla even today. You have Shishgari Mohalla even in the city today. You have areas like Nalbanpura. Now these are all mohallas, wards or neighborhoods in the city which are associated with certain specific craft. And these crafts, the originating point is the reign of Sultan Zainul Abidin. If you see the city is the present historical city. It's more or less oriented along two nuclei. One is religious spaces. So you have places like Tasgir Sahab, you have a place like Haj Sabr, Naqshband Sahab. So you have a locality which comes in the vicinity of a religious site, like you have at Khanka Mohalla, originally Alauddinpur, but then the Khanka takes over the whole neighborhood, and the whole area today is famous as Khanka. One, it is religion. Second, it is craft. So across the city, you find that there are areas and mohallas which either are directly associated with the craft or else with a family which was linked to a specific craft. Then, in terms of the urban planning of the city, you have Nalamar Canal and the 9 bridges, stone bridges on the Nalamar Canal, which all come from Zainul Abidin. So there's an Nalamar, before the, what do you call it, Zainul Abidin's time, the water of the Dal would go into Baba Deb and then from there empty into Habba Kadal. So he had it diverted along the Nalamar Canal, which became a second line of communication. So basically, your traveling, your transportation is happening on Jhelum. It is the road. It is the highway. At that point, you don't have anything else. And he creates this parallel second transportation spine, which is the Nalamar Canal. Then we have mentions, and then Mary mentions that even in his time, you had a bazaar by the name of Zaina Bazaar, which extended from Zaina Kadal all the way up to Znaid Kadal. You have these things happening. Then you have areas in terms of the expansions happening, which is directly or indirectly linked to him, like you have the Lachman Kol, which brings the water of the Sindh. First, it comes all the way up to the Rajdhani, which is in Naushehra. Then a branch of Lakshman Kol comes all the way into the heart of the city, and it empties itself into the Jamia Masjid. So this was there till 1930s. Nalamar was there till 1970. So the urban fabric that came up in succeeding years and generations followed a pattern mostly which was given by Zainul Abidin. One of the contributions, and which is not a small contribution, of Zainul Abidin is also that he was the man who, or he was the ruler, man or woman, who was responsible for building the first permanent bridge in Kashmir on the river Jhelum, which is Zain Qadal. It still survives by his name. And then you see his successors kept on adding. So you have Fateh Shah and you have Fateh Qadal, you have Habib Shah and you have Haba Qadal, and then it goes on even as late as the Dogra period. So this is again sort of it shows the genius that is Zainul Abidin in the way he is looking at populating the land, and he's looking at this sort of expanding Srinagar itself. The location of his capital, Nowshera, which is basically all the way from, as I said, Madin Sahib up to Sora, is perfect for building. If you see the older city, which is from Ali Qadal all the way up to Habba Qadal, is located in a low-lying plain. It's almost a flat plain. So it has always the possibility of sort of getting submerged during floods. Again, the land is not good for building. It is the area around from Hawal all the way up to Lal Bazar Sora, which is perfect for building construction. It's on a slightly elevated land. And if you see, there is a sort of a natural slope which happens all the way from Sora if you go down towards Jama Masjid and Nauhatta. So there is natural drainage also there in this area. And he basically asks his associates, the courtiers, to come and build their palaces in there. As I said about Mullah Kabir, in an area which is Nalbal, which is located in the vicinity of Nowshera, we still have the Mazar of Mullah Kabir, the Shaykh al-Islam who was there during the time of Zainul Abidin. Again, in that area, we have one of the most perfect example of Kashmiri architecture, Muslim architecture, which is the mosque built by Sayyid Muhammad Madani. Now, interestingly, generally it's said that this mosque was built by Zainul Abidin for Sayyid Muhammad Madani. But if you see the epigraph of the building, it's clear that this was built by Sayyid Muhammad Madani himself. So he mentions Haza Banaya Masjid Sayyid Muhammad Madani Al-Faqir Sayyid Muhammad Madani Baskin Kashmir. This mosque has been built by the Faqir Sayyid Muhammad Madani in Kashmir. So that is there. Again, in that area, you have Dumat. Now, Dumat has a rather very interesting story. So and again, in a way, it slightly points to your earlier question, was there any Ottoman link to the court? Anyway, the building itself is a Timurid building. So that is clear. It is Persianate. But if you see the dome, it's a very circular dome with 4 side domes. You don't have this sort of a profile of a dome in Muslim architecture, or before that, you don't have this sort of a profile in Timurid architecture. The architecture is very Byzantine, as you must have seen in Turkey. There is this circular, you call domes. Now the question is, where did the artisans or the builders or the artists get this idea of building this dome? What is happening is that in how do I put it? I exactly don't remember the date, but somewhere around, if I'm exactly sure, you could even Google it up till the time I remember it, somewhere around in 1453. I think 1453, we have the fall of the Constantinople to Sultan Mehmed II. So the Ottoman Turks conquer Istanbul. And what happens is that, and this, the Byzantine Empire is actually referred to sometimes as the Sultanat Rome. It is Rome. Byzantines are the Rome. It's as such they address even in the Quran. So what is happening is the fact that there's a migration of artisans mostly west towards Europe. But there is also a certain amount of movement into areas which are in the east. And there is a possibility that it was at this period, which is 1453, if I remember it correctly, that some of the artisans came all the way into Kashmir. We don't have any way of establishing it. It's mostly a hypothesis based upon the physical and the visual similarity and a certain coincidence of history. There is a possibility that you had artisans coming from the former Byzantine Empire, who came to Kashmir at this period and were responsible for building this unique building which is known as the Mutt in the heart of Srinagar city.
Shakir, do you have anything to add?
I think Samir pretty much covered everything with respect to the architecture of Budshah.
But I mean, a more layman kind of a question that I would ask is like, where was the money coming from?
Apparently, he had copper mines. That's the general answer everyone gives. He had huge sort of mine copper and apparently even silver. And then there's also this indication that they would also get some gold from the river. So there were things happening. But then I would again assume there would be a certain amount of trade going in and out of Kashmir itself, also at this period. Kashmir was always a hub of mercantile trade. And that is why you find that at the start of the Muslim Sultanate, you have this body of Muslims in Kashmir when Kashmir is a Hindu empire. Where did they come from? Who were they? Why would they be residing in Kashmir? Because Kashmir is a part of one of the sub-branches of the Silk Road leading into South Asia. It is an important sort of a trading point, and I would assume that even at this period there was some trade going in and around.
Speaking of gold coins.
In fact, to add to Samir's argument, there was so much copper that every government announcement was made on a copper plate. It was inscribed. Budshah got it inscribed in Persian on every copper plate, which was placed everywhere in Kashmir. In fact, the successors of Budshah were also supposed to take cannons were inscribed on the copper plate that other kings, succeeding kings, were supposed to be abide by.
Let's move from buildings to one of the greatest things that still last is the development of the Nastaliq Kashmiri script, where a lot of historians say or commentators say that it was the first time that Kashmiri was written down in a script, and it was spread around during Budshah's rule, and he was also writing poems in his own name. I think his name was Qutub. I forgot. Shakir was mentioning it earlier.
Qutubi,
yes. So how influential was Budshah when it comes to developing Kashmiri as a language, as a scripted language?
I think his overall emphasis on education was very much, has been highlighted by the historians. He was interested in opening new schools and educational institutions. We see that during his tenure, we see that the seminary of Sheikh Ismail Kubrawi is expanding. There are students coming from Herat. They are coming from Transoxiana. There's a large madrasa near Islamabad. Its principal was Mullah Ghazi Khan. And there are a lot of people coming in at that time. There are educational institutions. He spends a lot to get the Sanskrit manuscripts translated into Persian and Arabic manuscripts translated into Sanskrit. So it means a lot of people are learning both the languages. We see that in his court, the Pandits are learning Persian. The Muslims like Mullah Ahmad, who translated a lot of Sanskrit texts into Arabic and Persian. So there's actually a lot of interaction happening between the people. New people are coming in from outside. They are disseminating their own language. Local people, the Kashmiri Pandits, are translating Sanskrit. So it's likely that out of the fusion of this interaction, we see that slowly Kashmiri, which is also the language in which Budshah spoke, was also used. That script was picked up, and it was in that script that people began writing and learning. So, but this is where the crucible, the Budshah's tenure, is actually the crucible during which all of this takes place. In fact, Shriwara mentions that all these Hindu texts were not just translated into Persian, but also the language of militias, which must be either local Kashmiri or perhaps Arabic or even Persian. So Budshah even writes, when upon the instigation of his ministers, he expels this Mullah Ahmad, one of the poet laureates. But the then poet laureate writes a poem to him, and then Budshah is so overwhelmed by him that he recalls him back. And then there is this tract which is penned by Budshah called Shikayat, because he's upset with his sons, because his sons he had three mostly three sons, this Adam Khan, Behram, and Haji Khan, who were power hungry, who are shown, who texts describe as being very profligate, and they create these internal dissensions, and for power due to which the centralized authority that Budshah had maintained, it eventually crumbled, and we see that slowly Kashmir becomes vulnerable to foreign invasions. We see eventually the Mirza Haider invasion from Kashgar. There are other Kamran Mirza from the west and other places. So clearly we see that Budshah, the emphasis on education that Budshah had maintained had created the basis on which the other this literally activities will follow. So the credit goes actually to Budshah.
I think one thing that we missed mentioning was this university that he built in Nowshera, which was a home of learning music, fiqh, and other sciences as well. So it kind of emphasizes how important education and production of knowledge was during his time also. So
Yes, and
we're moving to the end of our podcast. So let's also move to the end of Badshah's life, as Samir Bhai was saying how he recalibrated himself towards Islam. There was also this controversy during early parts of his rule or before his rule was the like a lot of historians say, this imprisonment of Nundrish by the Shahmiris, and then he was freed. And there's also this story of how he was part of his funeral as well during his time. So what was Badshah's end like? He ruled the country for more than 52 years, and he is sick, he's old, he has 3 sons, one of whom tried to kill him at Buller Lake, and for somehow he saved himself through a spiritual intervention. So talk us through the end of the great Badshah's rule and his life.
I mean, because this is another sad part of the great king, if you say so. So you are a 69-year-old person. You ruled for 52 years. So that means that most of the people whom you grew up with, your ministers, your confidants, they have left this world. And then those who are in the court, who are a part of the court, are a younger lot. They are contemporaries of your sons who are basically vying for position of future power. You are basically a loner at your own court, which would be one of the saddest things. I mean, this is not something that happens only to Zainul Abidin. If you see, in the end, the demise of Shah Jahan is also because of the fact that he had a long reign. And in the end, he outlived his contemporaries. And there is a period wherein the successors are already making sort of the passes for the throne. You are a sort of impediment in the way to power and future glory. You have outlived your time. You are on the throne for a period too long. Ideally, that is how the rest of the court is seeing him. And in this period, I mean, it could be sort of very melancholic life at the end of it. And if you read Shri Vada's sort of depiction of his death and the end of his days, it seems more and more that he is a lonely guy in a court, almost in constant fear that everyone has turned against him. And then there is this sort of spiritual retreat on part of this king, and he is more and more absorbed into sort of penances and prayers and maybe seeking the other world. He is no longer of this world. So in the end, it's a rather very sad statement on the life of one of Kashmir's greatest king. I would say the greatest ruler that Kashmir had. But then again, if you read some of the texts, once he dies, you have this brief moment where the sons fighting for the throne, one of the sons is sort of in that sort of pain that, how did I treat my father in his last moment? So it's a sort of a sad human story, which could be for anyone, whether it's a king or a pauper. But it does, I mean, in the end, it doesn't give a good feel to how these things end up during his reign.
Yeah, so basically, when Budshah, the dying years of Budshah, he had ruled for a very long time. Like I said, the highlight of his rule was the centralization and the strong central authority that he had he had been able to establish in Kashmir. That sort of withered away, and we see Kashmir becoming vulnerable to foreign invasions. Shri Vara in particular talks about how Budshah he paints the picture of the despair which Budshah had found himself precisely because of his sons. because the sons were power hungry and they were after each other. Two of them even tried to attack. They even started the confrontation with their father. One of them later repented and eventually succeeded him and became the Hyder Shah, the new Sultan. But Budshah, the dying moments are captured by Shriwara Pandita. He says that no one cooked food that day, and everyone in Kashmir was mourning. Of course, he had, like you said, he had attended the Dundrashi's funeral. But about imprisoning Dundrashi, I don't think there is much reliable evidence. But he did imprison, sort of exile another Rishi saint called Zainuddin. But again, Ekurafiki is very skeptical about whether that is true or not, because he says that there's no other source to corroborate this. He thinks that Ekurafiki thinks that it might have been a sort of counterpoint to the fact that Shivan Bhatta was able to cure Budshah. So because in that story too, the Budshah is cured by the disease when he recalls Zainuddin from Tibet. So it seems like they were part of literary tropes that Muslim hagiographers would deploy, which we now take as very real stories, but they might not have been that real at all. But as far as his death is concerned, Shriwara Pandita says that when he died, he had a flowing black beard, he had a long pointed nose, his chest was as broad as a door panel, and wide forehead and bushy eyebrows. Shriwara Pandita saw his death in the real time, so he captures it in a very beautiful prose, in a very lyrical prose. But it's a sort of close, a chapter, a great chapter that came to an end that day, the day Budshah died, because it is still recalled as the golden period of Kashmir. And like I said, the centralized authority that Kashmir enjoyed at that time, the international prestige that Kashmir at that time, came to an abrupt end, and we see Kashmir becoming vulnerable in foreign